Welcome, everybody, to another special guest episode of the Abona Tennis Online Coaching Podcast. This is your coach, JY, and this week we bring on Coach Chris Trizzino, the Trizzino Tennis Academy up in Williamsburg, Virginia. Chris and I have known each other for a few years now, and he has such an interesting story, such a passionate person for the sport of tennis and just life overall. He's a very infectious person to be around, a lot of fun to have conversations with, and just loves the game of tennis and has great philosophies and has built a great program in a part of the country that needed another great academy. And he had such an interesting story that we actually have divided this episode into two parts. So because Chris started tennis very late, which is something most tennis players do not do, by the time he turned 13 is when he finally started to play tennis. That's not normal for a lot of people, and especially to become a great player and a great coach, that's very, very rare. So we spend a lot of time just talking about his story in part one and how he got to who he was, the things that led his decisions, and then how he got to where he is now running one of the best academies in the Mid-Atlantic, if not the country. And then in part two, we talk a little bit more about his coaching philosophies and his thoughts on coaching at tournaments, how he makes time to talk to parents, and a bunch of other things. So if you want to listen to part one, this is where you're going to hear about Chris's incredible story. If you want to listen to part two about the coaching part and his philosophies, then tune into the next episode, as that's where we'll get in all that great coaching information. Hope you enjoy. Chris Trizzino. Man, we've been talking about doing this for a little while. I've wanted to do it longer than we've been talking about it because I've always found you just to be one of the most interesting and fascinating stories, because you're the kind of people that I love that are still in tennis. So I'm glad that we finally get to have this conversation. So thanks for making the time, because I know you are crazy busy during the week.
I found a window. I was able to eat lunch real quick and then come over here. But being on the Abona Tennis Podcast, this is like my "Mama, I made it" moment. More than like winning a slam or something. It's like I made it.
Well, I fully expected you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. I fully expected you to be eating while doing this. So, because that's just how busy you are. And I think that's, we talk about what it takes, right? We talk about what it takes for a coach to run as good academy the right way with the right values. And it's not just this, hey, we got clinic from 4 to 7 and, you show up 3:45, roll the baskets out. So, you do a lot more than that. And we'll start talking about all the things that you do for your kids and why. But I first want to start just with you. I want to talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to the position where you're running one of the best academies for sure in the Mid-Atlantic, but you can argue in the country. That's partly why I want you on this podcast, so people can learn about this stuff. This is not just like, hey, well, we got to go to South Florida for something like this. That's always what I get, or California. You started tennis late. How old were you when you started?
It's funny that you're starting this podcast with my tennis history, because I am not the norm when it comes to, right? Like you were saying, like my pathway to becoming a coach, it was not be a junior player, go to a college program. You go and you get to whatever ranking in the world, and then it's like, okay, well then I become a coach, and it's like JY's like, yeah, thanks for that's what yours is, right? And it's like mine different. So I played competitive soccer from 4 years old to, obviously YMCA, but 4 years old to about 11. Was doing the travel soccer was my life, soccer practices every day, tournaments on the weekend, traveling with my dad. Ended up moving from New York to Blacksburg, Virginia. When I moved from New York to Blacksburg, Virginia, was really young for my age. So I was right on the age cutoff going into sixth grade in New York, but going from New York to Virginia, their age cutoff for grades was completely different. So when I went to Blacksburg, they were like, considered a fifth grader from your birth year. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm not going into fifth grade. Like I'm going into sixth grade. I already did fifth grade. So they said, well, you being birth year, which was 88, you fall in line with the fifth graders. So I ended up playing on, all of my friends were in sixth grade, but then they ended up having me play on the fifth grade soccer team, which obviously in fifth grade and sixth grade, that's like equivalent to like 20 years in adult life. And they said, no, you have to play with the fifth grade team. But all of my new friends and my buddies are on the sixth grade. And I'm like, guys, like I don't like this. Like it was just not enjoyable for me. I wasn't excited about practicing. I wasn't excited about, not being with my friends since it's a team environment. And obviously as a sixth grader playing on a fifth grade team, you kind of feel like you're not in the right place. You don't feel like you're where you belong. So I ended up pretty much at this point, I was like, all right, well, I'm not playing soccer anymore. I'm not enjoying it. I'm not having fun anymore. I'm not getting the opportunities that I feel like I deserve and that I want. So I ended up quitting soccer. One of my friends, this guy named Jake, he'll probably not see this, but if Jake is out there, Jake was my reason for starting tennis. He was like, dude, like, why don't you try playing tennis? He's like, it's a sport that I play. I love it. It's fun. Why don't you give it a try? So I didn't start playing tennis until I was 13 years old. That's the story to your when did I start question. But so I didn't start until I was 13.
And so you start playing, but obviously, I mean, it's not like you were unbelievable to start at first. And I think one of the hardest things is when you're 13, you're kind of aware when you're good at something or not. What kept you in the game to pursue it to the point to where you wanted to continue playing at a higher level, right? That you wanted to play competitively, that you got on your high school team, you're looking to play tournaments, you're doing all that. I mean, how were you able to push aside that, or were you even aware of like, hey, I'm not a superstar, or you didn't even care?
I didn't even know because it's like I wasn't in an environment where I really understood the pathway of what competitive tennis looks like. Because I think there's such an educational component to the sport where a lot of parents just don't get it, right? So I wasn't in an environment where it was like, you play the sport, you choose this pathway, you play this level tournaments, you train, you try to get a sectional ranking, national ranking, you play Orange Bowl, you play Easter Bowl, you try to get into Eddie Hurry, you try to do all these events. I was just a part of a tennis program. I was just at a tennis clinic at my country club in Blacksburg, Virginia. And it wasn't like a country club program because the coach who also did the country club was also the local high school coach. And this guy named Louis was my first coach, and he was like the tennis guy for the whole area. But I was never educated on what a competitive pathway or what that looks like because of the program that I was in. I didn't have that education. I just enjoyed the sport. I enjoyed playing. For me, my pathway was you play on your high school team, you enjoy it, whatever, you're doing a varsity sport. But I didn't know anything beyond that. Even when it came to college tennis knowledge, I wasn't educated because of the program and the environment that I was in. I didn't know what was beyond what I was currently doing. So my experience in juniors was, you play tournaments because it was just a tournament. I didn't understand what the intention behind it was. There was a USTA ranking system. There wasn't any UTR or anything like that. And then kind of throughout high school, I was playing, but my only way to judge my level was from high school tennis. And then I think I was like maybe top 100 in the New England section as a junior, which I didn't know that wasn't all that great. If we're being realistic, I'm like, yo, I'm top 100 in New England. I made it. Like you don't know. Like I had no idea what I was doing then. And I think kind of like my senior year, still trying to figure out what I wanted to do in my life. I had no clue what it is that I wanted to do. I was the kid that was, trying to figure out, well, what school do I want to go to? Oh, what's your major? Oh, I'm undecided. And it's like, I have no idea what I want out of my life or what it is I'm trying to accomplish. So probably going into my senior year, I was kind of looking at some lower end college programs to potentially play like on a D3 program. But it was just, at the time, it was like, I still, again, didn't have any knowledge of what it took and what it entailed and what that pathway was like. So I actually ended up doing a postgraduate year. I didn't go to college right away. I did a postgrad year after high school at a school called West Nottingham Academy. It was a pretty much a boarding school. Went there for a year to prepare me for college. I ended up going to Radford University. Radford had a pretty good tennis program. That's where Martin, I believe, played at. And, it was like they had a pretty good team. And again, not knowing or being educated about true levels of tennis, I had no idea even at that time. I went out there, practiced with the team. I think I beat their lowest guy on the team, like 12-10 in a 10-point breaker. And it was just like, but I was still so invested in Greek life that I didn't choose the tennis pathway. I certainly don't think I would have actually been able to be on Radford's team. I just wasn't good enough. I didn't have the skill sets. So that was about 18, 19 years old. So I'm in college, 19, 20. I'm going to school in the exercise, sport, health, education program, pursuing to be a physical therapist because it's what is socially acceptable by the world. It is a job that when you tell somebody about it, it kind of gives them a head nod. Oh, that's great. You're a PT. It sounds good. You can make a living out of it. It was a good pathway. It was safe. It provides opportunities for you. So, but during school, when I was 18 years old, summer breaks, I was coaching tennis during summer camps is when I started when I moved to Maryland. A guy named Brian was a director of tennis, hired me as a junior pro, and I was teaching lessons at 18 years old, doing the summer camps, doing all that kind of stuff, learning the craft, learning how to coach. But it was like every break that I came back and I wanted to coach. Summer breaks, Thanksgiving breaks, winter breaks. All I wanted to do was coach. I was thinking about coaching. And so freshman year, do that. Sophomore year, same thing. Junior year, same thing. All I'm thinking about is coaching. I end up dropping out of college my junior year. I don't even have a degree. I didn't finish school. I don't think a lot of people actually know this. No. I didn't finish school because I don't even know if you knew this. I dropped out of college my junior year. I hit an absolute wall. I felt like I had no pathway. All I was thinking about was coaching. I just wanted to coach tennis. I knew that I loved people and making a difference in people's lives, and tennis ended up becoming the platform for that. That was my platform in making an impact. And it kind of just like gradually increased. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with my dad when I was left Radford. I was like, "Hey, Dad, I don't want to go back to college." And he was like, what do you mean you don't want to go back to school? I was like, I really want to pursue coaching. Like, I love coaching. It means the world to me. And I think my dad's concern was, well, what does that pathway look like? Like what does that pathway look as a tennis coach? Because my dad didn't know. I mean, my family, my dad and stepmom and all my other people in my family all have a higher education, master's degrees, very successful in business world or whatever else they do. And I was like, I want to be a coach. So it was like, well, what does that pathway look like? And how do you accomplish that? Right. It's like, what does that look like? Are you going to have options? Are you going to have choices? And I was like, I don't know. I just know that I want to coach tennis, and I know that I can see what my next step is. I don't know what the other steps are, but at least I can see the one in front of me. And I know the step in front of me is I've got to coach. This is what I want to do. And so, I think my initial thought was, oh, I'll be a coach, or, hey, maybe I can work up to be a director. I'm going to be a director of a club one day. Like, that's going to be what I'm going to work up to. And it was so distant in my mind, but that was kind of what I knew in the tennis world. So that was the beginning of really where my tennis career was at about 20 years old, where I made the decision, I love people, I love coaching, and I'm going to put my whole heart and put all of my effort into learning the craft, learning about the sport, learning how to coach, learning about people, different character, personality types. I'm going to take on every single lesson possible. I don't care about their age, their ability. So at the beginning, I literally taught every single lesson. Somebody wanted a lesson? Cool. 30 minutes, let's do it. 45 hour, I taught every single level. But that was the beginning of my tennis career, was me dropping out of college because I wanted to pursue coaching.
Now, contrast that with how many people you work with, right, in the program that you have that are so set on, oh, I need to have this UTR so I can get into this college, so I can play here, and so I can study this and that. And if something is a little bit off, it's like panic button. Mm-hmm. Because if they're not achieving what they want, it's like the end of the world. And it's, here you are, mid-30s, right? A little lower. How old are you now?
35.
35. All right, mid-30s. So mid-30s, running an incredible program, running an incredible business, though I don't like to call coaching a business, but it is. You work for yourself, right?
Yep.
How many kids are you overseeing now?
We probably have about, I'd say, close to 50.
And the one thing I've always known about you is how much you're just always happy. You're loving life. You're loving what you're doing. It's not a show. You don't have to put up these cheesy, Instagram videos and then you just take the smile off and all right, back to work. You don't do it. That's naturally you, like what people see on the videos real. You post and everything. And gosh, I think your example, at least for me, time will tell, and hopefully a lot of kids can learn from this, and we'll move on to more of the, your actual coaching and stuff. Is just that, isn't that just the best? That's how you feel on a daily basis. You're just loving. All you did was just, look, this is just what I really want to do. It makes me happy. And you didn't even have an exact pathway. You didn't know what it was. You knew you just loved what you were doing and you wanted to pursue it wherever it was going to take you. And here you are.
It's I think the thing that it really goes back to what I was saying before, where like I had no idea what future steps were, but I knew what the step was in front of me and I took that. Right. And it's like, there's so much beyond, and you have no idea what it is. It's an unknown, right? People can either be afraid of the unknown or they are willing to explore it. And I always chose the path that I could see in front of me and I went with it. And so I think where my coaching philosophy comes from and my love for life and my love for people comes from all the experiences that I've had. And so when I look at what my Trizzino Tennis Academy brand is, my brand represents all that I've experienced in my life. And I try to make sure that that example and those lessons and the sacrifice and the work is an example of all that I did. And so I always, in my 20s were insane. My 20s were crazy. I had no fear in my 20s. And I have no idea where that came from. I think a big piece of it is, probably all the different moves that I did and the lessons that I learned from my parents. And my dad was a really big role in kind of mentoring me and educating me and, working towards certain things and all that kind of stuff. And, but my 20s were nuts. When I was like 20, and I think this is where you and I first initially met. When I was like 24, all through my early 20s, I was still playing. I was still training. I was not good at tennis. When you really look at it from a bigger scale, I was awful at tennis. I was not good. And you just get to a point where you kind of have to accept it. You got to realize that. So early 20s was not good. I played a lot, trained a lot. I started to get to a point where like I hit puberty very late. So I was a big time late bloomer. But by like 23, 24, I was like, I'm actually getting to a somewhat respectable level of tennis. That's when I made the decision that I was going to go play futures events. Because I didn't play futures events trying to make it as a player. I played future events to learn as a coach. Right? There's a fitness coach that intentionally gained like 80 pounds so he knows what his clients would feel to lose 80 pounds of weight. There was like, I saw this thing online. Like this guy was like, I want to know what it's like for my heavy clients to lose weight. I'm going to go through the same experience, like intentionally gain 100 pounds just so he can lose it, to learn about it. So that was what my thing was. I'm going to play futures events, not because I think I can make it as a professional athlete. I will never claim that I was a professional tennis player. There's a lot of people out there who will be like, I was a professional athlete. Like, no, you weren't. You played futures events. You cannot claim that. So I will never claim that I was a professional tennis player. But I wanted to play futures events. I wanted to do the tour. I wanted to travel. So I know what that life was like. On the road, flying, playing, training, flying somewhere, spending $1,000, losing first round, getting on a flight the next day just so you can cut back hotel expenses, trying to find a warm-up court to hit with somebody, trying to find somebody to hit with. I wanted to experience the tour in whatever way that I could. So I took 20 months of my time. It was cut short because I got injured, but I set myself out. I'm going to do the futures events and futures tour as long as I possibly can. I was the director of junior development in my mid-20s at a club. I have no problem being transparent with this. I think I was making about $70,000 a year, which was pretty good then. I was doing pretty well. I quit my job. I sold everything I owned. I made T-shirts that said hashtag Team Trizzy on it. I sold them for $25 to make money. I made money. My dad ended up matching whatever I saved to help me on my tour. I had sponsors that people really believed in me. And I set myself out to go do this. And it was one of the crazy experiences I've ever had. The people that I've met while traveling, like I'm sure for you too, some of the best relationships and friendships that I had are from people that I've met on the road. I was around people who had similar goals, similar passions, similar desires. That time on the road was brutal. And I learned all about it and I put myself out there. I was super vulnerable, but I wasn't afraid of being vulnerable. And I was okay with that. After the future stuff, I got injured playing Tommy Paul when he was 17 years old in the first round of a 10K in Weston, Florida. I was winning 1-0. I should have retired. And then at 1-all, I strained my oblique. And then that's pretty much when I called it quits. I went home, I was injured, came back, played, got injured again. And I said, I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. I learned what I needed to learn. I experienced it. I go back to the club that I was starting at. They then made me the director of junior pathway. I was back at that club from like 26, 27, 28, 29. At that point, that club has always known me as the little 18-year-old fun Chris. So that's how everybody knew me. I didn't have the respect that I felt like I needed, and I wanted to put myself out there more. I then, with networking and connecting, I ended up in Florida. I got hired at Midtown Athletic Club to be a part of their high performance program. And while I was there, I'm super grateful to have had the opportunity to travel with Quinn Gleason and Anderson Reed. I was really grateful for that opportunity. I knew my coaching ability was there, my playing ability and hitting was not, and I can certainly admit that, especially for that level. I did that for a year, and then that's what brought me to the decision of I did my year on tour. I had my experience as a player, as a coach. I put myself out there. I went to a different state. I put myself on the line. I did my year in Florida was my sacrifice year. I made $26,000 in the year of 2019 so that I could learn valuable lessons of what it's like to be on the road and coaching and touring and learning from other people. I then was dealt with the decision of what to do afterwards because my partnership with Quinn ended and Anderson ended up stopped playing tennis. So I had this pathway of now what to do. After all those experiences and learning what it is that I wanted and where I belonged, I knew in that moment that I belonged in junior tennis. I have accumulated enough knowledge and experience to build my own thing and to share this with all these other players that I've experienced. So there was I had two pathways that I can go. I was recruited to become the director of a tennis center in California. I got reached out to. They were going to bring me on as the director, new ownership. a facility, I think had about 20 courts, a gym, a pool, clubhouse. Was completely run down, and they were investing millions into it. And I got recruited because they go, we heard you were the guy that can create an environment, bring a team together. So do you want to come to Cali? I then had another opportunity with my friend Neely, who I went to Radford with. So 18 years or 15 years later, somebody that I was friends with at Radford, is currently the assistant director at McCormick Nagelson in Williamsburg, which is at William and Mary. I had 2 routes that I could go. And Cali just did not seem like the right fit. So I left Florida. I packed up my car. I was renting a room out of Anderson Reed's house and packed up my car. I drove 14 straight hours to Williamsburg, Virginia, and ended up starting my career with my academy in Williamsburg. It initially started as I was supposed to become the director of high performance for McCormick. As you all know, that was 2020. 2020 was COVID. I moved to Virginia to become the director of high performance at this club. COVID hits. I moved there. I get an apartment. Remember, 2019 was my sacrifice year. I had no money in my account. I bet on myself. I took the risk and I bet on myself. I drove there, moved there, get an apartment. I have no idea how I was able to lease an apartment with my, financial record. And COVID hits. Tennis Center closes for 18 months. And public courts finally opened up about 3 months after I moved there. I start coaching on public courts. Nobody's in school, so the public courts are available. And I was able to go out there. And at that moment, I said, I have to build something. And facing adversity and all that was never an issue for me because of all that I did in my 20s in pursuit of becoming a complete coach. And I went from about 0 hours to 50 hours in weeks from starting to coach because I was the new guy in town. I was the new person. My goal was to teach every single junior possible in that area and get my name out there. So I just grinded, whether it was like summertime, winter, I was out there in 30 degrees, like just grinding to be able to get all this time. And so that when the center opened back up, I would have this whole group of players that I could bring in, and then boom, we have a program. It ended up working out where because of COVID and because of all the restrictions that were placed on William and Mary, my position in theory was no longer available because they had to make all these cuts and all this different stuff. So then I ended up working out a deal with William and Mary where I ended up having become a contractor. So when I moved back inside, that is when Trizzino Tennis Academy started. And I had already kind of planted the seed and built the foundation from living in Williamsburg during COVID and took advantage of COVID rather than letting it, kind of wear me down and me running away from it. Made the best of the situation. And here we are today. Trizzino Tennis Academy is in full force. I've got about 6 coaches hired. And we are full force, full action, have a lot of players. We were present at Orange Bowl, Easter Bowl, all national level events in all age groups. And here we are. And that is my journey into becoming a coach and where I am today.
All right, now that's such an incredible story from somebody to start at 13 to then move into tennis. It's so hard. We all know how hard tennis is as you get older. So just an incredible effort and incredible story to just follow just his passion and just take it where it may and not be afraid that he doesn't really have a set out plan. And he's just willing to take some chances and just see where life takes him. So check out the next episode where we'll talk more about coaching philosophies, how he makes time for parents, the importance he places on being at tournaments, and much more. So thanks for listening to part 1. Check part 2.